Hey there. I'm taking a little practice break and thought it would be a good time to try something new that I've been thinking about doing for some time now, which is basically just sort of filming short-ish videos where I'm just talking to the camera about whatever's on my mind. I used to do a podcast with my friend Chris, and one of the things I really loved about doing that was, besides just talking to Chris all the time, was having the chance to just sort of think out loud and sort of think conversationally about topics, because I'm pretty, I have a pretty strong text bias. I read a lot, I write a lot, and I think if I try to think of expressing ideas, I default to writing, and it's difficult sometimes. And I've been having a sort of years-long writer's block now because I'm trying to work on something that's pretty capacious and difficult to sort of put together all in one go, right? So I think what I'm going to try to do is just film myself talking and put it out there, and then critique myself, and have other people watching, if anyone sort of makes it through these, critique me and just sort of have a conversation, and maybe from there we can get something rolling. Anyway, so housekeeping aside, what did I want to talk about today? Well, it's a pretty dreary day here in Bloomington. It's been raining the entire time, and it's just sort of damp. Even inside this house, it just sort of feels wet, and it affects the day. It affects the day musically, right? I mean, my traverso feels kind of swollen a little bit, like the wood is actually a little bit swollen, and so do my sinuses, or my face, or my body, or something. I don't know what is happening technically, but or physiologically, but everything just feels a bit slower in its response and a bit more subdued. But there's also sort of weight to it that can be beautiful. And when I'm practicing today, what I've been thinking about is that there was a time a few years ago when I would have fought against it, or just given up entirely, right? I would have said, this is a bad day, and I don't sound good, and either just get frustrated and quit, or spend my entire time sort of unproductively fighting against it, and trying to sort of fix the problem. Let's say the problem is that the response is a little bit slow, and there's a lot of that is sort of baked into the way that I think about practicing, and I think the way that a lot of us think about practicing, because it's kind of what's expected of being a professional, right? I mean, being a professional to some degree means that you can sort of deliver a product day in, day out when you're paid to do so, because that's what people expect, when you exchange goods and services. So, and certainly if you're trying to sort of win an orchestral audition, or play in an orchestra, you need to sort of be spot on in a sort of really athletic way that's almost against human nature, right? That's part of why it's so terrifying to take auditions and be in an orchestra. It's to sort of play Stravinsky against the vicissitudes of life or something, is a sort of challenge that only a few people can do, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with being a great musician. It's almost like being a great athlete, because to play music is not merely to control it. There's this quote by Jay Bernowski that I always think about. I think it's from Science and Human Values, is the book. And he says something like, the Greeks said that Orpheus played the lyre with such sympathies that wild beasts were tamed by the hand on the strings. They did not suggest that he got this gift by setting out to be a lion tamer, right? And I think that's true to some degree with your relationship with yourself and also with your music, at least for me. And I've been trying to just find the beauty in the daily changes in the way that I play and my mood and my temperament that day, and my traversos as well. You know, it changes. It's just a stick of wood. It's a wooden pipe at the end of the day, and it's entirely natural that it will change as, you know, the humidity and the temperature changes, or, you know, if it's getting a little bit dried out or if it's freshly oiled. And I think you have to not only learn how to roll with that, but I think the point of daily practice, it's really worth reorienting daily practice to sort of not being necessarily, you know, where you learn how to control music, right? Control yourself and control your instrument, which is a sort of standard like classical orchestral frame, you know, vis-a-vis music, and really thinking of a life that you live with music, right? And music is a way to sort of express really your personality in the deepest way. And I don't mean, you know, you gotta play music always in your own way and make it totally unique by finding new tempos and new ornaments and stuff like that. I think that's pretty juvenile. I think if you go day in, day out with this attitude of trying to sort of live with music in this way and really play music every day as if it might be the last time that you play it. And I don't mean that as in you play your heart out, you know, but really that this is where you're at today, this is how things are sounding, and you can either choose to make music with it or you can not, right? And I think it's always better to choose to make music with it, because you might not ever get the chance to do it again, right? You might get hit by a car on your way out the door. Well, not on your way out the door, but you know what I mean. Where was I going with this? I've sort of lost my plot here. You know, this is why I kind of also want to try doing these little YouTube videos, is to try to be a better sort of extemporaneous talker, right? Yeah, so to play music is not merely to control it, right? It's to live with music and sort of really make the music that you play a deep expression of your own personality. And I think the really great musicians, you hear it in their playing, right? It's not just that they play really fast or like really in tune or with a great sound, and some people really do, but at least for me, the musicians that I really keep going back to, some of them have, you know, pretty significant flaws in the way that they play, or, you know, flaws. They're not perfect, right? But they just are so themselves, and it's just lovely to hear them, because it's lovely that they exist, right, as people and as musicians. And it, you know, I don't think I'm saying anything that crazy, and it, in some ways, I'm a little bit, you know, shocked that it took me this long to get here in my understanding of what it means to be a musician. Because I don't want to say it's not taught in classical music education. It's just not the frame, you know, it doesn't make any sense to teach this when you're in a conservatory, because the point is to win an audition and play in an orchestra. And like I said, that's a different game, right? But if you're playing chamber music, what I think people really want to hear is yourself and the way that you relate to others, right? That's what's interesting about chamber music, and that's what's interesting about chamber music groups that play together for a long time, right? And, you know, one of the things that's very common when you listen to jazzers or folk musicians or whatever, pop musicians, etc., talk about their music is that they often will bring into their technique, you know, classical things. Like they'll say, well, like, oh, I really practice these etudes that classical people practice, and it makes my technique a lot better, and it makes me able to play, the music that I want to in a much cleaner way, right? Even Charlie Parker did that, right? Like, there's a video, or no, it's just an audio interview between Charlie Parker and Paul Desmond, and they're talking about playing these sort of classical saxophone etudes to sharpen up their technique, and that's pretty common. People playing like bluegrass, people playing Bach or something, to hone their technique, and I think it doesn't really often go the other way. I don't hear it at least talked about the other way that often, because I think in classical music it's a bit cloistered. Perhaps there's a bit of a superiority complex where it's kind of like, well, we're the best and everyone else can learn things from us, but we can't really learn anything from them. But that's what makes listening to someone like Paul Desmond so great, or Bob Dylan. It's that their relationship to music is so intrinsically tied up with their relationship to themselves, and it changes so much day in, day out. And I find that my connection to, when I listen to them, I find that my connection to them is much deeper than it is to any, quote unquote classical musician, because of that fact. And I don't know. I think that's my point with this video, is that's, I'm not trying, it's music, there's a million ways to play it, and there's a million different things that people are trying to do with it. So I'm not trying to preach to anyone or say that I've got this thing or this idea that other people don't have. I'm not saying anything crazy here, but I'm really just talking about what I have been thinking in the past year or two with regards to my own practice, and what I sort of view as the value of daily practice. So, well, I think it's about time I better get back to it. Peace.